And a good afternoon to you. I'm Ted Langdell, and we are here at Bridge Coffee Company's Clark Avenue location, and my guest is Tim Styczynski.
Thank you so much, Tim.
All right, and we want to make sure that we pronounce that name correctly because it's Polish?
Yeah, it's Polish.
At what part of Poland?
I have family in Warsaw.
Oh, okay. Let me make sure that this microphone is working right. Try talking again.
Absolutely. So pronunciation of the name is actually a bit of a hand gesture move.
Okay, we've got microphone trouble, but that's all right. We've got more than one mic and we can share. So there we are. So this is what we're going to do. This is known as Mike on a salad or a panini. And we'll talk about the panini in a minute.
You got it.
So we're in a building that originally was a gas station.
Yeah.
And after it was a gas station, it was something else. And then it became a what?
Coffee shop. There was, so there originally in the late 60s, a service station, Texaco. I think it actually changed hands to a couple of different gas companies, and then a member of that family did a auto repair business, and then another member of the family did the transformation of putting in the coffee shop about 2005, 2006, and then that changed hands to another group of folks, and then we picked it up in 2016. So 5 years of having Bridge Coffee Company, Clark Avenue location.
So back then it was called what?
Clark Avenue Coffee.
Okay.
Yeah, and that family and the folks in the community was really tight knit. Different style of coffee and atmosphere. We've made the space and place our own, and Bridge Coffee Company, we roast our own coffee that we feature and serve here.
Now, you're the second company that's tried to do coffee roasting in town, and you've been a success. I know that Mike Mahler had a company, a coffee roastery, actually, in what's now the Brick on D Street in Marysville. And it was not always, I guess he expanded into what became, well, there was another restaurant after that, and I think it's now Sawyer's Sweet Shop on Plumas Street. Okay, just by way of information and identification.
Mike's a great character.
Yeah, he's got quite a different background in talking to people. But so when you acquired the business here, were you roasting coffee at the time?
Yeah, so we actually started Bridge Coffee Company in 2015 first, and on a cottage food permit. I had been home roasting coffee since 1997, and I was getting people who were hearing about the coffee that I was roasting that I didn't know and asking to buy it. And so Jennifer, my wife, and I, we had the conversation about, well, we could do a little business around this, and started selling at the farmers market, and the connection with the community and the overwhelming wonderful response that we got from that. We then picked up our first wholesale customer with Justin's Kitchen, and we're selling at New Earth Market, and we ended up with what was the Crave. Our coffee was on the shelves at the Crave, and seeing that the community loved what we were doing. And what we do is specialty coffee that's some of the finest grown coffee in the world, and roasting in a way to highlight the origin character rather than the roast character. So light, medium, and dark doesn't apply to the type of roasting process that we do.
So explain a little bit about how that works, because I don't know how many people are actually coffee drinkers, but they may not know a lot about the product that they may be drinking here. So
I would say most people, coffee is a commodity. It's traded and treated much like oil and gasoline you put in your car.
Yeah.
And it really is kind of like thought of as fuel. I need my caffeine, and I wanted enough sugar and cream in there to make it palatable.
Right.
So our coffee, like take Ethiopia for example. Ethiopia is birthplace of coffee. There's still wild coffee cherries that are grown there, and it has a natural blueberry or raspberry character to it. But to get that, we have some wonderful roasting equipment that is connected to a computer, and we can see a lot of the information that's happening in real time and applying heat and energy to that coffee in such a way to accentuate that natural character in the coffee.
And I see that we're getting some interruptions in our broadcast. If it's a little glitchy, folks, we'll clean it up. We're going to rebroadcast this later today. So in any case, you'll have a chance to hear more about Tim Styczynski. And Tim's been a good friend of ours, bringing us the ability to live stream by providing some financial support over time, even long before we thought about coming over here and doing this. But they've been roasting coffee, and I notice what's on the screen now is your Sumatra coffee, which I gather is a regular item here.
It is. We regularly feature coffee from Ethiopia, from Sumatra, Brazil, Colombia, and El Salvador. And we chose those 5 regions because each one of them have a very unique character. Sumatra coffee, volcanic soil, has a wet hull process where the parchment and mucilage is all ripped off while it's still wet, and the cup character is very earthy, as opposed to sweet and fruity like Ethiopia.
So what do you mean by cup character? Explain some of these things. These are sort of like acronyms.
I love it.
And I want you to have an opportunity to explain that. And in a little bit, I want to find out a little bit more about how you and Jennifer showed up in Yuba-Sutter, and obviously you're still here, so we want to hear a little bit more about that. But let's keep talking about coffee, because it is something that people maybe take for granted, or it's there, but they don't know a lot about it.
So like in the wine industry, you'd have a sommelier, and they would be able to tell you a lot about the quality of that wine and that cup character of it, from the characteristics and terroir of where it's grown and the type of grape, and so the same thing happens in coffee. So there's a variety of coffee cherries that are grown, and the terroir of the land, and the cup character, or the flavors.
The flavor, okay.
Are what you can taste. And so like Costa Rican coffee can be super tropical flavors like mango and papaya. Brazilian coffees can be like peanut butter chocolate, Reese's peanut butter cups.
So is the flavor a characteristic of the soil?
A combination of the soil and the type of variety of the coffee bean or seed that is grown. So like a Cabernet Sauvignon has a particular cup character or flavor as opposed to a Chardonnay. And in coffee there's like a Catuai that has a particular flavor versus a Caturra or a Bourbon.
Okay. So when you're talking about the flavor characteristics, is a mango flavored because of the soil characteristics? And those kinds of things translate into the characteristics of what the coffee cherry. We think of them as coffee beans, but I guess they're actually cherries.
Right. Yeah. So like that mango flavor from a Costa Rican coffee is very much due to the growing conditions within Costa Rica and where it's sourced from there. The cherry itself is this really beautiful, bright red fruit and tastes delicious. It ferments really fast, so it breaks down quickly, but to eat one, it would be like eating a sweet cranberry.
So we've got a number of people watching, and if you have questions for Tim, we'd love to have you put them in the Facebook chat. We have Joyce Bracamonte and Noni, or is it Noni O'Malley is watching, Lena Sanders, Christine Daughtery, and who else is watching here? We have Miguel Sanchez. So hello to all of you. And if you have some questions for Tim about coffee, please go ahead and put them there. We will try to make sure that we see those and are able to then respond. So back to this idea of flavor characteristics. Flavor, I guess, being like the color that you would see if you could see flavor.
Oh, sure. In the coffee community, we have a lexicon of those flavors that developed through World Coffee Research and the Specialty Coffee Association and UC Davis Coffee Center, and they put a pattern of a wheel of different colors and different flavors in those colors. So like brown flavors like caramel and chocolate, you also associate in your mind, and like mango being a bright color, yellow, orange, banana. Then you have sour flavors, lemon, lime, and the types of isobaric acid and the types of acids that have flavor to them. Those are also on that flavor wheel and helps us to kind of get in the direction of where those are. And then like a sommelier grading a cup of wine, licensed Q grader, which I am aspiring to be, can rate and score the coffee. So specialty coffee is the best 5% of coffee grown in the world, has a threshold of meeting 80 points on the scoring. Then very exceptional coffees would be in the 86 point range, and all of our coffees are in that 86 or higher range. We had our Christmas blends, the bowstring.
Right. I remember receiving some of those, yes.
And a 92 point score on that coffee.
Cool. So, and let me get our graphics straight here. When you are doing all the button pushing while you're talking and trying to listen to what the person you're talking with is saying, it becomes a little fun, but it is doable. Now, what are you drinking there, Tim? You've got is that kombucha?
Yeah, kombucha on tap. So
show us what that looks like. Hold it up to this camera over here. There you go. You're good right there.
I
let's see the label.
I don't know the name of this one, but the flavors of it are like apple and kind of like an apple character to it.
Okay. And we have a question from one of our listeners. Why is Kenya the best single origin coffee? And if you haven't already done so, you might explain what single origin coffee is.
So single origin would be from a particular country, and Kenya has some phenomenal coffee. The Kenyan coffees have a very tomato like character, tomato soup, and you get a cup of that and it can have this overwhelming like tomato soup broth like character. I would say subjectively whether or not that would be the best single origin, but because I have a personal favorite that is mine, and that's Ethiopia. But there's also coffee from Panama that has gone off the charts in cost. A pound of green coffee that at auction sold for over $3,000 for 1 pound of coffee.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, the marijuana growers should.
That coffee has a very floral character, jasmine tea and hibiscus flower, and it's from a varietal called Gesha, spelled just like geisha, and that is like a single origin grown in Panama, but even a single varietal of just the geisha that was roasted. So
when you think about where coffee is grown, and I gather that there are some specific temperature and other climate conditions that you have to pay attention to, kind of like wine. We have a wine growing region up in the Yuba County foothills, and of course we have Sonoma, Napa, the Coast Range, where there's quite a bit of wine grown. There's also wine grown down in the San Joaquin Valley near
Yes.
Lodi and all of those places. Why can't we grow coffee here, or can we, and we just haven't had anybody doing it?
Yeah, there is actually a specialty coffee farm in California and the very southern parts of it, but the coffee grows best in a tropical climate. So between the two tropics, Capricorn and Cancer, is the territory that best grows coffee. But it would also be the reverse. If you try to grow a wine grape in tropical climates, it would struggle very difficult. So you can grow a coffee plant in the Yuba-Sutter area, but it wouldn't flower and produce fruit. It's just too far north in the latitude.
That's it. So you need certain heat and other kinds of things that occur over a period of time in the tropics that don't happen here.
Yeah, typically most growing regions only have a single growing season. So I think about that and how a coffee producer, he or she spends all year long nurturing these plants, and in 15 minutes their hard-earned work is either celebrated or ruined.
Doesn't sound like a great thing, but then of course we have that with some aspects of farming. For example, if we had a wet storm blow through here in the middle of flowering season, some of our orchard-based farmers would have some problems because you lose the pollen, you lose the petals, the bees don't know where to go or what to do.
Yeah, we could get
got some
we've had
issues.
amazing weather recently, but if we ended up with a hard freeze after everything started to blossom, it'd be really terrible.
Yeah. And I guess water would also be an issue at some point in time.
Sure. Water is in the processing of the coffee. You can have a washed coffee versus natural coffee, and the natural coffee is where the seed is dried within the fruit, and washed is where all of the fruit and mucilage has been rinsed off of the coffee.
Okay.
And that changes the cup character.
Because of the whatever composition is in the shell or what surrounds the coffee cherry, and
you have more enzymatic processes that happen, and then there's also natural fermentation processes that lend to the character, and you can draw out those different characters just from different processing.
Now, one of the other aspects that influences the flavor of the coffee that you have in your cup, like the one that I'm holding here, is obviously the roasting that happens when you are over in your Marysville roastery and you are dealing with how long do we keep this in the coffee roaster and what's the temperature. How does that affect it? And then I want to move along to what happens next, which is the brewing part of coffee.
Yeah, sure. So in roasting, there's different densities of the coffee, and so they all need to be treated a little bit differently on how much heat you apply at what time. And by applying the heat, you start browning the coffee, which is Maillard reactions, and then from there you start caramelizing the sugars, and they break down into different chains of amino acids that all affect the flavor. And so as we're applying the heat and energy and convection and conductive heat, it's like roasting a marshmallow. And so my wife is skilled at just browning the outside of the marshmallow and peeling the skin off and not cooking the center, and then continuing to do that. Where I like to roast it a little more slowly and get a gooey center, and then just a nice golden brown crust to it, smash that in the s'more. So the same thing can happen in a roaster. I can put a shell around the outside and undercook the inside. That gives a different character. And it works really well for different types of brewing versus more evenly roasting through the bean by how the heat is applied.
So that's all very interesting, because you can create a different exterior and how that deals with what happens in the next stages, and I didn't know that.
Yeah, so like
is that kind of like the coffee equivalent of putting a sear on a steak?
Yeah, certainly. You lend to the character of the coffee by that, but in the coffee, if you unevenly roast the center of the coffee, the cup character of that is overwhelmingly grassy and very vegetal and sour and not pleasant.
Okay.
And so an uneven roasted coffee can be very off-putting. Same thing can happen if you over roast the outside and under roast the inside. Then you've got this really bitter character from the oils that have been scorched in the roaster and an underdeveloped coffee bean. It's really out of line with, and so you dress it up with a lot of cream and sugar.
Okay. So basically, you've got multiple things going on. Obviously, you have to start with a good coffee cherry.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, from what you've been telling us, that that's what you're focusing on doing and trying to bring that to Yuba-Sutter and to the customers that may be able to pick it up at some of the grocery stores and other outlets that you have connected to.
Yeah.
We can talk about a little bit about the business aspect of that in just a little bit. But so you start with a good product, you learn how to treat that product well.
Still learning.
And still learning. So it sounds like there's a lot of little sample stuff that you're having to do. Do you have a little small test roaster, or do you just do small batches in your large machines?
No, I do have a small roaster that's very finest made roaster in the world, and I can also not only try different coffees, I can try different profiles and start to get an idea of what we would do in the larger production roasters just from those early samples.
That's cool. And Todd Fonderheide is watching, so is Jerry Payne. Hi, Jerry. If you have questions, you can go ahead and let's see, where's my camera? That's my camera. You can go ahead and put them in the chat down below. If you're watching on Facebook, just go ahead and put them down in the chat. We don't see that there. There we go. So go ahead and do that, and we'll pass these questions on. We're keeping an eye on what's happening there. So you end up being able to do test roasting and get some idea about what is working, at least in the small roaster with a small amount of product, so you're not wasting anything. And then you go ahead and do a test batch with the larger stuff, find something that works for that particular coffee cherry, and what you want to achieve based on this kind of like color wheel of coffee flavors. Is that how that works?
Yeah, and part of that process of sampling is a thing called cupping, and so we would have like 5 cups out and of the same coffee, and you slurp it and aerate your palate with it to get the nuances of the coffee, making sure that there's some consistency to it and the quality. And then we're also thinking about how it's going to get brewed, because the drip coffee versus a French press immersion coffee versus an an espresso machine, you can also tailor your roast to those different machines. I try to shoot for more of an omni blend or an omni roast for the coffee when I'm roasting it, so that it would work well as an espresso or as a French press or as drip coffee. But that same coffee done in those 3 different methods will taste differently because of what's being extracted from the dissolvable solids.
Huh, interesting. We should schedule in another few months an opportunity to visit the roastery and
Yes.
see what goes on over there. So,
Mad scientist lab.
You've mentioned a variety of different ways of brewing the coffee.
Yes.
Does there seem to be any common or any? I guess maybe what I'm trying to ask is what's the method that most people use, and I guess is that a target that influences you?
Actually, the probably what the most people associate either is if they're doing it at home is either a K-cup or a coffee maker.
Okay.
Coffee cup.
A K-cup being a Keurig cup that is a one-time thing. It goes into the machine.
Our coffee doesn't do well in that. It's so. I mean, the coffee is exceptional, but part of the reason why it's exceptional is because it's so super dense, and roasted fairly light, that the machines don't necessarily have enough oomph to get the water hot enough and with enough pressure with the volume of coffee to get a good extraction from it. So a single cup option for us that I always recommend is an AeroPress. It's a single serve, and it's kind of the best of an espresso and a French press that's super easy to use. But the most important tool in brewing coffee is a grinder. Your grinder is the essential to tuning the coffee to your method of brewing. So if you're brewing in a French press and want a coarser grind versus an espresso machine and you want a fine grind, you've got to have a grinder that can do that efficiently to get the maximum flavor out of that coffee.
So when you're talking about grinding, and some people will buy coffee at a store, and there's oftentimes a grinder that's there. What does that do? And should you grind the coffee in the store and then take it home, or is it better to do it just before you're about to use it? And what do you have to pay attention to in terms of how fine that grind is for a particular process you're using?
It's a fantastic question. The very best thing you can do is grind your coffee at home right before you're going to drink it. Within 30 minutes of the coffee being ground, it's going to oxidize and start to stale, and you're going to lose so much of the volatile aromatics that will end up adding to the cup of coffee. So a fresh roasted, less than 2-week-old coffee that is ground within 30 minutes of you enjoying it is going to be a mind-blowing experience. If you've never tasted fresh coffee, if all you've had has been stale coffee, having a fresh batch of coffee is world-changing.
And that's ground from the beans. The beans are relatively fresh, meaning they haven't been sitting around roasted, and then 6 months later you get them or something like that.
The oils that are in the coffee will rancid as well as start to stale. So the grinder is such an important investment into coffee. So if you have a blade grinder you've got a lot of boulders and fines, which is large particles and small particles, still utilizing that with a paper filter to catch those is better than what you're going to get from any cake cutter.
So that would be something like what you would use with your regular, well, I guess it's the drip coffee method, like if I said Mr. Coffee or something like that,
yeah.
people would get that, yeah.
Yeah. Then next level of going to a Burr grinder, we recommend the Barazza. The Encore is the least expensive. And
so what is a Burr grinder and how does it work?
Yeah,
We're familiar with the blade grinder, which is your little two blades, and it looks like wings on an airplane with a little tip, the little wing tips that you might see on some of the planes these days.
Those work fantastic for spices. For a Burr grinder, you'd have like a bowl that has blades on it, and then a ball that starts to go into that that has blades on it, and those burrs start to shave the coffee, roasted coffee bean, instead of pulverizing it. And so as it's shaving it away, it's giving a better surface to, ratio for the water that's going to come in contact to dissolve the yummy goodness that's inside of it.
So the idea here is to also, when you're at home grinding, to be able to control the surface area of the coffee that's exposed to the hot water, in addition to the temperature of the water and how long it's exposed to the coffee.
Yeah. So starting with great coffee, then having great water. What you're going to drink is 98.5% water, and the mineral content of that water will affect the extraction. Having the right temperature, but generally around 200 degrees, hot enough to dissolve the compounds that are in the coffee. Change the water temperature, you're going to change what's going to get dissolved.
What happens when you change the water temperature? If you go lower or higher, let's say it's the same amount of time that the coffee is exposed.
Yeah. So trying to melt butter with cold water, and it's really difficult. So cold brew coffee, where ours is brewed for 20 hours, it's full immersion where the coffee grounds and water interacts for a full 20 hours, but at room temperature or lower cold temperatures are going to extract things because of the oils and compounds in that differently than if we took that same coffee and put it under pressure at 200 degrees in an espresso machine.
And what is, let's talk a little bit about the espresso versus drip coffee or French press or something like that. Obviously the different methods give you a bit different result, but is it possible to get the same flavor in the cup when you are using different methods?
Sometimes the answer is no. That you cannot replicate a flavor from one brew method to another with the same coffee because of the forces involved. So
if somebody wants to try to get the same flavor that they can experience here at Bridge Coffee on Clark Avenue at home, they need to have the same kinds of tools and follow the same essential recipe.
Yeah, it would be difficult to replicate at home, but doesn't mean that you would have bad results at home. Still an enjoyable cup, but just different. So just give an example of our espresso. We weigh out our espresso to 1/10 of a gram and have very tight tolerances of how much grams of coffee goes into each espresso pull. A pull is like the shots of coffee. So all of our pulls are the volume equivalent of 2 shots of espresso. And so you have, like, let's just use generic numbers, but 2.5 volume of water or brewed espresso to the amount of coffee. So for every gram of ground coffee, you'd have 2.5 grams of brewed espresso. And so it's ground to a very specific tolerance that in 27 seconds, it gives the brewed volume of espresso for that pull that we're looking at for the ratio of the, and if you were to buy our vertical support espresso, which scored 90 points by the way, our everyday espresso, and you have a commercial style espresso machine, it's 18 grams of coffee and 54 grams of brewed espresso, so 3-to-1 ratio. We specifically did a little bit longer or more volume because of the roast profile, how light or dark that the coffee is, which is on the light side, and the flavors that are in that coffee.
Marvelous. So obviously you can get a good cup of coffee at home.
Yes.
Using the right tools and starting with the right coffee and just following the recipe. What you're describing sounds an awful lot like what I used to do and what many photographers would do with photochemical compositions, making your own developer and then, or other tools, the liquid tools of the photographic trade, and then how long it remained in each particular solution, developer in particular, and the temperature that the developer was in. So maybe some of our photography friends who remember doing that sort of thing, maybe in high school or even at home, can relate to that and be able to develop a good cup of coffee at home using that kind of an idea.
Shout out to my daughter. She's a Sac State student graduating this spring in photography in a lab class right now. She's just got a 4x5 bellows camera and developing.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So.
And Christine Doherty, thank you for watching, and she asks, can you talk about low acid coffee and do you carry it?
A lot of the acidity in coffee is dependent on the soil conditions and how it's post-harvest handling. The Sumatra coffee is the lowest natural acidic coffee, lowest acidic coffee naturally that we carry. Another thing that for people who are sensitive to the acids and what it does to their digestive system is cold brew. the method by which cold brew and the things that are extracted kind of lowers the acidity, but also the other compounds that negatively affect people who are sensitive to coffee. So if you're sensitive to coffee, try doing cold brew. If it's 30 degrees outside, we can steam the cold brew hot. So you, even though it was brewed cold, you can enjoy a hot cup of coffee.
Okay, so we were talking about cold brew coffee at one point here, and I kind of sent you off on a little bit of a tangent. Let's go back to cold brew for a minute, and you were explaining that you do the extraction for 20 hours, and it had something to do with the grind and the length of time and the temperature of the water, obviously.
Yeah. So cold brew can be done in a mason jar. You can do it with any coffee. Most coffees, when you cold brew them, that you would purchase from the store, will be very one note. Low acidity, dark chocolate, not that that's bad, but dark chocolate, if you were to taste dark chocolate, has a lot of other compounds that you taste with it. And so, starting with a really high quality coffee, roasted very specifically. We grind most coffee that you buy from the store, you would want to grind coarse to because your water contact time is longer.
And you are doing what to the surface area, the total surface area? How does that affect things?
The general thought is the longer the water is in contact with the coffee, the larger the coffee should be.
Larger meaning?
Like the
size
of the ground.
Okay, got it.
So sand versus kosher salt versus rock salt.
Okay, gotcha.
So Turkish coffee is ground super fine, and yet you do brew it for a longer time. In experimenting with cold brew, we actually found that a finer grind on a lighter roast was more ideal. On a darker roasted coffee, a larger ground coffee, and not immersed for as long was a better cup character. So you got to experiment with the coffee that you're sourcing.
Okay, and so when you talk about gosh, there was something there. We were talking about Turkish roast, very finely ground coffee. Sometimes I kind of wonder if I'm overdoing it a little bit. I have a little blade grinder at home. It's actually a Braun from Germany, and somebody gave it to me as a gift, and that must have been 1979.
Still
or
kicking.
70 something, somewhere. Yeah. Well, it hasn't gotten a whole lot of use over the years because off and on I would be doing coffee grinding at home, and then sometimes not. So years would go by and it would sit on the shelf. But it's a good tool in that regard. Anything else that we've left out about the coffee part of coffee or how to enjoy a good cup of coffee?
I think part of the enjoyment is the experience, and I fell in love with coffee not because of the coffee, but because of the hospitality that it brings with sharing a cup with a friend, and so that adds to the enjoyment of coffee, and I greatly appreciate that. It's one of the things that I love about having a coffee shop is to be able to have that
It's
experience.
the social part of it.
Yeah. Good company makes a cup that much better.
Well, plus it's quite safe to drive after you've had coffee.
Sure.
So let's talk about you for a minute.
Sure.
Where were you born?
I was born in San Jose, and I grew up and mostly went to high school in San Jose. And I say mostly went to high school because a lot of times I wasn't where I was supposed to be, and had rather hoodlum life growing up. And then when I after turning 18, my family moved to Trinity County, a little rural community west of Reading. There's less people in the town that I moved to than the block that I grew up on. And as I was getting more and more in trouble,
And where in Trinity County is this?
Junction City, so
Okay.
little town of Junction City,
And
just west of Weaverville,
Okay,
Trinity
so
River.
up in the Trinity Alps kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I knew that my life was heading in a direction that wasn't healthy for me, and sought out a change in my world to maybe find some different influences than what I
So
was.
your parents moved there and you went
Correct.
with them?
I did, yeah, rather than staying behind and continue to head down a dark path.
Were you a coffee drinker at that point?
No, I actually got hooked into the volunteer fire company there. The fire chief was a retired Los Angeles County fire chief. He's just a remarkable man, and he took me under his wing and said, "Let's do something with you," and got me a path into emergency medicine. Well, the thing that fuels EMTs and paramedics is coffee, and
Yeah.
that was when I fell in love with that community and people sharing their stories and experiences, and started drinking coffee then. Then in paramedic school, I so somehow very fortunate, drop out of high school, hoodlum. I was accepted into Stanford Emergency Medicine paramedic program, and received a
What changed in between?
well, having great influences, being surrounded by people that had a positive impact in my life. It wasn't that I became accountable to them, I became accountable to myself, and wanted to do something with my life. And so I was fortunate to go to Stanford, and down the street from our campus was a great coffee shop, and I can still remember the espresso machine and the barista and the subway tile on the wall and the line of people when I had my first espresso from them. Because in the late 80s and early 90s, Starbucks was coming around, and people were having vanilla lattes and mochas, and this cup had this wonderful chocolate and caramel and vanilla character and a citrus note that I was just blown away by. Such an indelible mark on my life, and so I then tried to recreate it.
So you got hooked,
I did. Yeah.
and it sounds like you're still hooked.
Yeah. So my paramedic career was remarkable. I got to fly all over the world and work in Middle East and take care of people. And I, like I was saying about starting the business, it was just because I had people I didn't even know that were asking about the coffee. Then realizing I was still taking care of people, it was just different medicine.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And so you were up in Trinity County. You were being a paramedic. How did you end up getting several hundred miles south?
Well, I'll try to give the short story. I was working in the Middle East and living in Barcelona, Spain, and my best friend had recently been ordained pastor, and the Hope Point was doing a church plant in Marysville, and he was appointed the senior pastor for the Marysville campus, and called me up one day while I was overseas and said, "Hey, we're doing a church plant, and when are you coming back home, and want to do this together?" And so my journey back to California actually was just a calling from God to come to the area and serve in this community.
So, what led you? Your pastor friend, in essence, was here and led you to Yuba-Sutter.
That's absolutely right.
So, how did that happen, and how long ago was that? I mean, where did you go, and what did you do here?
It was 8 years ago. His family and my family are so closely tied. Like my son and his best friend are in Disneyland today.
Okay.
And my wife and his wife are best friends. My daughter and their daughter is best friends. And when we moved to Yuba City and then finding a home in Marysville, one of the things that really struck me was just how much people here love one another and look out for one another, take care of one another. And we fell in love with the community. It was really just the connections here, being able to meet people like yourself and others that genuinely have some special connection to one another.
Who'd have thought, huh?
Yeah.
It seems like there are more of these stories that we hear as I talk to different people, and that's one of the reasons that we're doing Lunch with Langdell, is because we run into interesting people, and it's sort of like, okay, well, I don't have the ability to give you a cup of coffee, but I can give you a show, and through that show we have the ability to learn more about people who help make this community tick.
Well, speaking of lunch, we have a really fantastic lunch here.
Oh, okay. What do we got?
In our cafe, we wanted the food to match the quality of the coffee. I think we've got the best breakfast burrito in the area. Our own homemade salsa. The sandwiches, we use bread from Tin Roof Bakery. That's like their sourdough starters over 50, 60 years old. It's been going, and we make our own pesto and our own aiolis using like Kalalea olive oil, which is a local, world-renowned olive oil as an ingredient.
So you're doing things in a very local way.
Yeah, absolutely. The just like your sandwich is a turkey pesto. So
okay, so we're gonna move the microphone here just a little bit.
Sliced turkey with a sourdough ciabatta,
Let's see.
sun-dried tomatoes and spring mix, and fresh pesto with Kalalea olive oil.
There it is.
High quality cheese that goes onto that, and pressed in the panini, which is a kind of a George Foreman on steroids.
Okay. So what do you have over there? I've got what you just described, and you've got something on a croissant.
I have this delicious buttery croissant from Tin Roof Bakery, spring mix, and it's got lox, smoked salmon, capers, onion, cream cheese.
Let's go high end here.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have some lunch here, and if you've got questions for Tim, you can put them in the bottom down there. Patricia Phillips is watching. Hi there, Patricia. Do you have a question? If you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll pass it on. So, what kind of flavors do you sense in your sandwich there, Tim?
Well, the lox, I love salmon. I actually talk about salmon in a way that's related to coffee. I love salmon. I love sashimi salmon. I love smoked salmon. I love baked salmon, grilled salmon. All of those different cooking methods have a different flavor to them. Like smoked salmon, when you have a really smoked salmon, it tastes more like smoke and less like salmon. Mm-hmm. When you have a really roasted coffee, it tastes more like roast and less like coffee. And so it's part of the reason why we roast our coffee the way that we do, kind of on the lighter side, just developing the sugars, but not allowing the oil that's in the coffee to get scorched inside the drum. That lends to a bitter cup. This, like the buttery croissant and the cream cheese and the salmon and the capers. The capers have that nice tart vinegary that complements the butteriness of the. And then the spring mix is not just filler. The kind of the bitterness that's within the greens is something that complements the sweetness that's in the bread.
Mm-hmm. And while you're taking a bite there, we'll show folks the panini here with its nice little golden crust, and then kind of show you what this looks like here. Very tasty. I'm enjoying it. Wait a minute, let me get, there you go. Okay. Mm-hmm. Hold it up there, yeah. All right, you're good. So we are enjoying lunch here. That's why we call it Lunch with Langdell. We get a chance to share some food and share the food with you and share the people with you. And that's what the whole 9 yards is about here. Let's see.
Come join us, 101 Clark Avenue.
Oh, yeah, 101 Clark Avenue, 101, yes. Do say the 0 instead of O, because that's the correct thing to do, but it's also essential in terms of making sure that somebody knows it's a number you're talking about and not a letter. You know, give somebody a website with 101, and if they mistype it because you mean 101, they're not going to get to where you want them to go. Oh, speaking of websites, if somebody wanted to find out what's on the menu, where can they go?
Well, we have an app for that. You can download the Bridge Coffee Company app from the Google Play and the Apple Store. And then our web address is bridgecoffeeco.com. Bridge Coffee Company, so bridgecoffeeco.com.
That's CO.
Yeah, Bridge. And on our site, we also have the ability to have coffee sent to your home, roasted whole bean coffee, a subscription service. We have a Roasters Select Coffee Club, so much like a wine club, and send you a curated collection of coffee throughout the year.
And let's see, they can also look at the menu for Bridge Coffee Clark Avenue and order online.
Yeah, they sure can. On the locations page, you can see where the Clark Avenue menu is, and there is a way to order straight from there. The truth is, one of the things about our shop, doing a sandwich like this or coffee like that, takes a little time. We are not fast food. Each drink, each sandwich, each item on the menu is very carefully taken care of so that you're taken care of. So when you come in to order, it's going to take a minute. And so one of the ways to help mitigate that is ordering ahead and picking up on your timeline, on your schedule. And super beneficial for the staff and great experience for the customer.
But you also have some things in the case that I see behind you. You can turn around over that shoulder and point if you would like.
Yeah.
But that kind of gives you the ability to pre-order or walk in. You've got some things that people can walk in with, and cold sandwiches,
grab and go.
Hot coffee, cold sandwich.
Yeah, and delicious pastries from Tin Roof, but also some scones, and we make an espresso brownie, and so we brew espresso and utilize it as an ingredient in our brownie sauce. Fantastic.
And I see that, let's see, Margie Rollins is watching. Hi there, Margie. Do you have a question for Tim here? Wave again. Yeah, there we go. And we have a question about something about George Foreman on steroids. I think he was referring to the panini maker that's used to make the panini here.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's commercially available for people to take home.
Yeah, our panini probably weighs 50 pounds from the cast iron that's made from, hot and ready to brown up your bread, melt your cheese.
Welcome. I'm Ted Langdell. In case you are just joining us, I am the Langdell in Lunch with Langdell, and we are talking with Mr. Tim Styczynski. And somehow we're going to need to get our Marysville mayor into a pronunciation class to help make him more comfortable pronouncing Jennifer's name.
Yeah, my wife is the finance director for the city of Marysville. Just a shout out to her and the city of Marysville. They have been making some remarkable improvements in the last several years.
Well, let's talk about that, because we're sitting here on Clark Avenue in Yuba City in a former, what was once a gas station, a Texaco gas station. You have a roastery in Marysville.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful 160-year-old building, and initially built for the fire department, and then in the 70s changed hands to a carriage factory.
1870.
Yeah, the 1870s. I love sharing. There's an addition that was put on the building, and the addition was added in the 70s, but it was the 1870s. And so we've been renovating that. We've got the roasters in there, but we have big plans for really fun place that the public can come and enjoy.
Yeah, I noticed you just got glass doors on one section, one arch opening there.
Yeah. Thanks to McCumbers for doing that installation, Mesher Door for doing our garage door, and then they're going to work together to do a full view glass matching garage door. So the front of the curb appeal of it's going to be beautiful. The cafe in there, I want to run like a microbrewery, and we'll just do some fun experimental stuff with coffee. So like we talked about different brewing methods and tasting different flavors from the same coffee, utilizing different brew methods. We could do that, having flights of coffee, so you could taste the coffee from Ethiopia versus Sumatra and Brazil and Colombia and El Salvador.
So an international kind of coffee tasting opportunity.
Yeah, so being able to cup by cup taste those different cup characters, those flavors that are in the coffee. Do some fun things with cold brew and nitrogen and different things on tap.
Nitrogen.
Yeah. So we, like Guinness beer, we have our cold brew that's been nitrogenated with under high pressure for several days, so that when you pour that, it will actually do the same Guinness effect from the little nitrogen bubbles that seem to be it looks like the bubbles are floating down because of this cascade effect.
Coffee with Lawrence Welk.
Lawrence Welk, yeah. The one of the things though is it's such a nice creamy texture to the coffee.
Interesting.
Yeah.
A creamy texture, but not using dairy products.
That's right.
Does it affect the flavor?
Yeah, it does. The introduction of gases into the liquid does sometimes stabilize flavors. You can, but you can get a little more rounded flavors from it. That's difficult to describe. So if you were to think of like sharp edges of a crisp Granny Smith apple, there's a Granny Smith apple character, but it's more mellowed out because of the nitrogen.
Christine is asking, where is this and when will it be open? This is the roastery. It's over on 3rd Street in Marysville between B Street and C Street. It's on the north side.
Mm-hmm.
It's the brick building that you'll see between B Street and the alley, the name of which I've forgotten.
Elm Street.
Elm,
Yeah,
okay.
the alley is Elm, so the right across the street from Frank M. Booth and a half a block away from the Wood Butcher.
Great. And so she wants to know when it's going to be open.
I would like to know the answer to that as well. So, just with the costs of doing things and renovating a 160-year-old building and wanting to be a destination, we have a beautiful tile plan for the restroom and the floors and exposed brick walls, and it will be a showcase kind of place.
And you've also got a little area set up, or at least you did when I visited the other day to pick up some coffee because I was out. You have a little kind of a hangout area that's set up with some musical instruments and could be sort of a place for people to come over and do some things.
Sure, I would be more than happy to do a private time with folks and do some like roasting demonstrations. We can do some coffee demonstrations. We can talk about the laboratory that's being built, the education room that's being built, and what we're going to utilize that space for. Happy to do.
So how would people get a hold of you? What's the easiest thing to do, Tim?
info@bridgecoffeeco.com. Sending an email into info@bridgecoffeeco.com.
All right. Can you believe that an hour has gone by?
Just like that.
It seems like it, and there's probably more to share, but as you get the roastery developed and have an opportunity to showcase some more things, more coffee,
If
more
I could,
sandwich. This is a wonderful sandwich, by the way. I taste the pinion nuts from I tell you, this getting older thing is a heck of an interesting adventure, you know. Had my birthday a month ago, and so we're now kind of into the next.
47's not old.
It's a state of mind, I guess.
Just one thing to share, like how this is so important to us, connecting communities with specialty coffee. Specialty coffee is something that we want to help people understand that there is a greater world out there of coffee that goes back to hands and feet that produce that coffee, and the commodity of coffee, the disposable thoughts around coffee needs to turn more to appreciation of single origin coffees and the producers that grow those coffees. Not only will it be a more enjoyable cup that you'll have, but you'll be doing something really worthwhile. And the consumers of specialty coffee are real heroes. Not only are they doing their individual piece in their community to make a difference in their world, they're making a huge difference in really poor third world countries by supporting specialty coffee.
Marvelous. Well, this has been quite an adventure without having to leave town, which is a good kind of thing to do, because then you're not creating more air pollution and a whole bunch of other things. You've got a coffee truck, you've got the ability to do catering. Take a look at the website, bridgecoffeeco.com. That's bridgecoffeeco.com. And you'll be able to learn more about what's happening here on Clark Avenue, and also with the adventures in roasting land on 3rd Street in Marysville. But one question before we go. Where did the name Bridge Coffee Company come from? What's the etymology of that?
Oh, fantastic. So that connecting communities with specialty coffee, the bridge is the connection between passionate coffee producers who love growing coffee and passionate coffee drinkers who love drinking coffee. But it's also a reminder to me that my faith is my bridge of where I am and where God wants me to be.
So it's not just bridges across the Feather River, the Yuba River.
No, there's a bridge in every town.
A bridge, yes. And there's a bridge from person to person by being able to share coffee.
That's
like
absolutely.
We've been doing today. All right, and Lupe Rivera Moreno, thank you very much for watching. Along with Christine Dougherty, Robbie Cheney's been with us. He works with you, Margie Rollins, some of our other viewers, Jerry Payne, Todd Fonderheide, Miguel Sanchez, and Noni O'Malley. Hi there, Noni O'Malley, and Leanna Sanders, and Joyce Bracamonte among our listeners to the 2nd edition of Lunch with Langdell. Okay, so what are we doing coming up? Next week, Wednesday this time, we will be somewhere with all of the people who this Friday are going to be receiving some kind of recognition for what they do in the community from the Chamber of Commerce at the big gala that the Chamber is having. It's sold out at the Hard Rock Cafe, the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in southern Yuba County. Now, some folks want to say Wheatland, and I suppose because that's the zip code and what have you, it's in Wheatland, and if it's the Wheatland Fire Protection District, it's in the Wheatland sphere of influence if you look at government stuff, which we do here every Tuesday. So the gala is going to happen there, and then I believe it's 5 different award winners, 5 different people being recognized. We're going to gather for some lunch with Langdell and find out a bit more about who they are and what they do in the community and why they're here. Because a lot of these folks have come from somewhere else and they're here and they're doing good stuff. So we want to learn more about that. And then we're going to be having a kickoff of the Bakai Festival, which is happening in Marysville on the 5th and 6th of March, coming up here. So we'll be talking to some of the people who are making that whole enterprise happen. We'll be talking the following week with Bob Harlan from the, should be March 9th, We'll be talking with Bob Harlan about how he ended up here from the Bay Area, got involved in radio here for quite a while, and how he became the executive director of the Yuba-Sutter United Way, and find out more about the United Way and what he's doing in so-called retirement from the job he did for 30 years or more. So those are some of the cool things that we've got coming up in the months ahead on Lunch with Langdell. And our original guest, Dr. Francisco Reveles from the Yuba County's Office of Education. He's the Yuba County Superintendent of Schools. He will be joining us at a point sometime to be scheduled in the future when we can again have another Lunch with Langdell. And we've been enjoying some coffee from Bridge Coffee Company. I think Robbie did this particular video that's on the screen right now talking about your Sumatra coffee.
Delicious.
It is, and I've enjoyed that quite a bit at home. And then we also want to let you know about the fact that we have some local government things that you can find out about, and that is going to be happening on Tuesday. So let's take a little bit of a look about that, and we'll be right back. Wrong meeting.
Every roast is a different roast.
So join us next Tuesday, beginning at 9 o'clock, for a series of meetings that you can watch and learn what's going on locally. If you watch over time, you're going to learn about these different things, the county supervisors, the city councils, the staff that work with them, the local school districts, what they are having to deal with, not just with COVID, but with various regulations that they have to abide by. And with a variety of other things that influence our lives here in Yuba-Sutter. And you'll learn more about what government can do for you and what government can't do for you, but what you can do for yourself and what you can do to help other people. And that is our number 2 edition of Lunch with Langdell. I am and have been and remain. Let's see here. Here's my little graphic. Ted Langdell with Yuba-Sutter.live, which you are watching on Facebook. Which is facebook.com/livestreamingyes. So next week, tune in again around noontime, and we will have another show for you, this time with a number of folks who are engaged in doing other good stuff here in Yuba-Sutter. That's part of why we're doing Lunch with Langdell.